Ransomware, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, 100%. Because before, it was like, okay, you need to use like Western Union or sort of one of these places where you can kind of send money without too much scruple. The account, fiat at FTX. And so what prosecutors are now arguing is he knew, of course, what it was. He deliberately obscured. He'd be afraid of being indicted. Or I don't really understand why he can't go, but he can't go to America. So Sam was meeting with regulators. CZ felt cut out, like he was basically going to get a bad deal. Like they tracked his account. He's playing League while on calls about the failure of FTX. Wow. Just imagine the arrogance.
Is that arrogance?
Fine, but FTX was sort of the worst offender. Is let's say I give you a loan, Joe. So an unsecured loan would be I give you $1 million and I don't ask for anything. Not actually like this incredible business that you thought it was that you're going to get rich easily. So don't do that. Go do crypto. You got to get into crypto now. And then it became in assets. You can check yourself. Like, I have $1 billion in USDC. Well, that's great. But it doesn't matter if I have $1 billion in crypto, Bitcoin, whatever, if I owe $2 billion.
Right.
He's a shark. He knows what he's doing.
What was the conflict between the two of them that led him to do that?
The conflict was, it's a great question. The conflict was ultimately that Sam was trying to get some regulations passed, and he A1Z, A16Z. It was one of those, Sequoia or A16Z. One of them wrote this glowing review of Sam, basically saying he's going to be one of the first trillionaires. So literally had a $10 billion account that he mislabeled with Alameda Research.
Mislabeled?
Yeah, he's
whiz kid who you listen to him talk. He has an answer for everything. He's so articulate. He's so knowledgeable. Like, I listened to previous interviews before he got busted.
So they were paying everybody to promote this FTX crypto exchange. And the idea is this is the next big thing, right? And this is where you're going to make money. Very strange. And these offshore entities were also using like U.S. branches. Like there's FTX US, which was like more regulated, but not really that regulated. It's this thing. So all this money's going in. And then you basically wait. And as you're waiting, Ethereum's going out everywhere. A bunch of people are withdrawing, right? Because they're also taking their money out.
Right.
By the time, which thankfully she did, and she's fine now. She takes medication to replace the hormones her thyroid would generate. But I saw my mom kind of get swept in this thing that I knew was nonsense. But you're the CEO as of 2020. He hands it to this a girl he actually had a relationship with, Caroline Ellison, right? And she supposedly controlled it. He said she did pilfering FTX, the customer deposits, and was using it in Alameda Research, which was his trading firm, to try to make extra money, and he lost it.
And so this is all because it's on...
You're like, it's this magic internet money.
Magic.
How do you get some of that? How do you get some of that magic internet money? Well, you have to go somewhere to buy it. And so it's a crypto exchange is where you kind of go, you put your fiat, $10 million, or your data's lost forever. And you're like, call the police, and you go, hey, track this guy. And they're like, to what? To a Bitcoin wallet? To the son of Harvard lawyers. We just sort of can't lose. And nobody paid attention to some of the red flags that were going on until ultimately it was too late. It turns out he hate doctors so much, and it always seems to like end up with a sales pitch. Like it never was like, hey, let me just give you this free thing. It was like always like there's a catch. So Tom Brady backs him. Well, Tom Brady's got to have some guys who are looking into this. And then it's like, well, BlackRock backed him. Well, BlackRock definitely has some guys who looked into it.
Right.
It's Sequoia Capital. They said he was don't invest. Like, that's a bad idea.
People were calling bullshit, though. Just like they were calling... There was a few people that were wary that were calling bullshit on Bernie Madoff, and there was a few...
He's one of the leaders at the NASDAQ. I mean, he was one of the go-to guys, and so you thought, well, I invest with Bernie, like, I can't lose. It's like almost, betting on the house.
Jamie's looking it up.
I thought I knew it off the top of my head, and now I don't want to say the wrong one. A16Z.
A16. You think you have this backstop because on the books it's worth, X dollars. Let's say it's like worth $5 a coin. But what you're not realizing is the real risk is when FTX can't pay you back, they probably can't pay anyone back. Like the house always wins, right? So when FTX was taking off, it just seemed like everyone who was someone was backing him. So then it was okay. And then I think a lot of these people deferred. It's this guy who drives a Toyota. So you go like, well, why does he need to scam me if he's driving a Toyota, right? Then it's like, which Sam Bankman-Fried did. Then it's like, okay, I'm a millionaire by the time I'm 23 years old. Just buy my course. My course is, $2,000. Pay me $2,000. I'll teach you to get rich quick. So change that money for some type of crypto token. There's a lot of different tokens out there. And
explain tokens, because I don't understand tokens. I know there's crypto and there's tokens. Like, what is the difference between the two? Down, because it seems like they received additional scrutiny, right? Because now people are starting to look at it, and I saw that their value went down considerably.
Yeah, tokens is the individual. You can think of currency, right? So it's like the individual. So Bitcoin is, you have Bitcoin. Then you have, it's one of the cryptocurrencies. You have Ethereum. Ethereum, what are we tracking here? And then it goes to some mixer somewhere, and then we don't know where it goes after that.
So when Sam Bankman-Fried was working with
he blamed all the wrongdoing of FTX on Alameda Research. And he said, I don't control Alameda Research. Even though he was the owner, he's no longer touch your money, obviously. That was the whole point. It's like, you deposit with us, we're not going to do anything with your money. It's your money. It's like a deposit. It's almost like a bank. Like you deposit with a bank. Your bank isn't supposed to go ahead and take your money. This is what was going on in crypto. They're called collateralized loans. But what FTX was doing was they were saying, hey, we'll take $1 million from you, but instead of giving you That's right. But
also to the Republicans.
This is what's wild. So Sam knew publicly in our current American climate, it's left. And ultimately, because they had lost billions of dollars, it left billions of dollars in credit claims, basically. They didn't have the money. 5 minutes or 3 minutes. So I don't want to give off the idea that there's nothing here. But the problem is that with there's no Ethereum left, there's no Bitcoin left. You don't have the real tokens anymore. You just have your sort of nonsense FTT tokens, the tokens you invented. And he said, that her and I believe Gary Wang were big executives. They're cooperating. They pled guilty. They're cooperating with the feds. I mean, they did the same. I just wasn't interested. I was like, that's not my life. So I always wanted to sort of, have a voice. And so I started a YouTube channel just doing random videos. Right people in charge who are going to take the fall. You resign, and then you blame it on them later when everything goes wrong. His problem, though, is Caroline Ellison flipped on him.
So she definitely flipped on him.
She was smart. Yeah. She cooperated with me. But even Western Union has been they've been getting kind of pinched a little bit. Like, hey, you guys got to stop allowing all of this. But in crypto, because there's no service that said you cannot move. Like when I deposit with you, you're not going to touch my money. And I said, Sam, if that's true, where's the money of all these people? Good person in the space to where people thought, okay, well, if he's saying it, he's a guy who only says positive things about crypto because he's a crypto executive. So if he's saying there might be problems, there's probably some problems.
But Bahan and a lot of ums and ahs, and you just kept on him. It was amazing that he felt like he could go back to making money again.
I don't think he thought he would repay everyone, but everyone thought we'll just enter Chapter 11 bankruptcy. We'll restructure the company. We'll reopen. We'll just turn all the debt into new. They kind of shut down. Myself and some other people were saying we think they're insolvent because we had taken a look at their numbers and we said there's no way they have the money for this. They don't have the token. What that was to hide it from people who were trying to take a look at his books, but. It's just, that's what I mean by black box. You never know what games these guys are playing. Like they say, here's sort of the rough estimate of our balance. You have Dogecoin, you have SafeMoon, you have FTT, which is what FTX was using as their native token. So a lot of these guys, you'll start a crypto exchange, was going to undo sort of everything. Like if you don't root out the scams, you don't find ways to solve that, this is never going to work because if your abilities, it's hard to know. So people really just take you at face value and they have to trust that other people are invested. So I guess I'll jump in too.
And that's
he on Twitter. I probably butchered his name, but he was actually originally sort of an ally of Sam. So he invested in FTX early on, put $100 million in, and a senator's office reached out to me. They're like, what do you think about this? And I was like, I don't know, man. You guys have to. This is y'all's thing to figure out. Ultimately, y'all.
And in the FTX case, how much of it was getting celebrities to endorse the platform?
It's huge. This is what I wanted to say. Like, the more I study, is not surgery. You can just treat it naturally. Just don't worry about, hey, don't listen to the doctors. Don't listen to your general practitioner. You can just treat it with like colloidal silver. All these other guys buy into him.
Right.
And then they themselves are kind of also looking at each other, being like, well, that guy did it. Like, what? It's the hottest deal. Guy who enabled God, or who helped cover up God mode. And he's like, well, I don't want to comment on other, people, or it's just like.
Well, how does he skate on that? Like, how?
They're like, hey, don't work a 9-to-5 job. Like, be free like me. And I'm like, you're here on a Sunday at like 5 p.m. How free are you really? Like, you're just like, so it's like things are good for now. Yeah.
You don't know.
That was the problem with the FTX. Like, they had hidden all their numbers. Like, Sam had, he was, really well regarded in Wall Street. So when people invested with him, they knew the returns were insane. But why not? Like, there were just no adults in that room, and like the few adults that there were like, they had like a criminal lawyer. Well, anyway, I don't think he's actually been convicted of anything. I shouldn't say that. They had this guy Dan Free. I'll have to. My feeling is offshore entities should not be. They're not subject to our rules. How can you allow offshore, like? Yeah, I don't know. It's very what they wanted to store some Bitcoin with Tom Brady. They wanted to be alongside Tom Brady. So he's like, well, there was fungibility between wallets, really perpetuated their fraud. I can break it down. How much do you know about the FTX
Let's
situation?
break it down for people that don't know about it. So
let's do it. So FTX was this crypto exchange, and that video has aged so well because it's like people are like, oh, it was all true. But people were outright calling it a fraud. Like Mark Cohodes, he's a famous short seller. He was executives Ryan Salami or something. I think that's his last name. Salami. I don't know. I just don't know how to pronounce it. But he was like, the number 3 donor to the Republican Party. But it was all orchestrated through Sam. So he called it fiat at FTX. But it was a $10 billion hole.
What do you mean by mislabeled?
Well, it was on a spreadsheet, Joe. So he was put it on a spreadsheet for their balance sheet, and he mislabeled. I saw this, and my experiences up to that point, it kind of led me to like, I want to say something. But why is nobody saying anything? It just seemed like there was this, these people pitching this stuff, and nobody was talking about it. So I made this random video, just FTT tokens and pay everybody out.
Oh, that's what he thought? He's on amphetamines, right? So he can't be thinking totally clearly.
Or you were a grandma who just put 1 Bitcoin on there, or, more likely the grandson. He treated all the accounts the same. So when everyone came running for the money, they just withdrew until nothing was. You believe, it's kind of too good to be true, but the social proof is overwhelming, and it overwhelms your kind of like alarm bells. So the social proof is a combination of things. So first of all, it's like your hands in both pockets. But publicly, he's just like, he's donating to Democrats because he says, oh, I'm like this, like, I care about all these issues.
Yeah.
But it's like even more cynical than just buying one party.
Each other on amphetamines and making billions of dollars. Like, it sounds like a great story if it wasn't illegitimate.
Yeah, ultimately that's the problem. Like, Sam was just hopped up on amphetamine. They're like, look, I've been screwed by the banks. Every time the government's printing a bunch of money, where do I go? Right? You can understand the appeal, but it's just like you went tease for a while. But like, so I eventually like pivoted into this crypto direction and learned all about that. But it started just from a curiosity about scammers. And I wanted somebody to say the problem is when at the exact moment FTX can't pay you back is the exact moment that FTT becomes worthless. So you think you have all this collateral.
Binance hasn't had similar problems.
No, they've had a few runs, and they've covered withdrawals. So it's just the problem is a lot of it's a black box. And so now it's trying to be sorted out by the guy who literally unraveled Enron. And he says, this lawyer goes, it's worse than Enron. Located out in the Bahamas, which is a great place to put your...
Why do they do it in the Bahamas?
because it's unregulated. So the problem with doing stuff in the United States,
it's amazing that things with this amount of money can get this far sideways before anyone knows what's going on.
This is the problem with offshore accounts and stuff. This is a fraud because, no one knew. There's a bunch of backing. So I made a video at the time being like, this crypto CEO just describes a Ponzi scheme. Give you this yield. He starts explaining like this thing that sounds exactly like a Ponzi scheme. And so ultimately, Matt Levine's like, yeah, this doesn't really make a lot of sense. But again, it stopped short. We're just going to do a few transactions through your name. That just came out in a press release. It's the new charges. He was basically like they call them straw donors, because it's like, if I give money to you to give at the end when you're like ready for this thing to go down, because I know as soon as I get on, it's going to end pretty quickly after. I said, let me on. Let me ask him some real hard questions. Because all these guys are like, Sam, we everything. I don't have access to the book. Like, I basically knew nothing. So anytime you'd call him out on an issue, you'd say, where's the money? He goes, well, I don't know. It's gone. It's Alameda Research. Ask Alameda. Crypto is... Sometimes national currencies aren't a great idea and you want an alternative. So, like, look at the Turkish lira.
Initially, he thought he was going to be able to figure out a way to pull all the company's assets together and
I think
make everybody sound and repay everyone. And,
you do not get to that level and not know that things were wrong.
Well, reading her tweets about amphetamine use was pretty wild, too. The whole scene was wild.
And basically, like, shell games where you're hiding the money.
Yeah.
You're saying, oh, invest in this. This is going to become valuable later, but you actually own a bunch of gays. So, like, can you do this?
So someone had to be gay to do it? Like,
no, basically they were like, we need someone trustworthy we can trust to do this. So, hey, you're going to be the guy. Like, we bring on people like Tom Brady to promote it, Larry David in the Super Bowl. They kind of get buy-in from all these big sort of names and also reputable. So this is funny. They found his League of Legends account, and during some of the calls after it was a fraud, you could hear him clicking in the background. Click, 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 click. He's playing League.
It was like 70,000 or something like
60 plus, yeah.
So that's the lure. The lure is you buy in for pennies, and one day you're insanely rich. I'm sure you know about that.
To expose, but like, I'm interested in the characters who perpetuate fraud because they're such interesting psychological case studies. Sam Bankman-Fried, you could probably write a whole book about. It's sort of like hard. You kind of have to disprove every single, like, there's always a new like health guy telling you that there's some new alternative discovery, whatever. And I was like, this is kind of weird. And I was like, why do they that these basically nerds in cryptography thought of, which is it's brilliant. I mean, it is brilliant because it is basically, it's almost impossible to trace. And it just was kind of, I was just trying to find my way. I was just trying to, like, even before that, I had done a show where I was like trying to break down these topics. I was like, middleman, because there's no one who controls like Bitcoin. Like, no one can say like no to a transaction. Now it's like there's nothing to stop you from sending that money, and that's ultimately what he was doing. But it also looks like he was donating through some of his executives, and I mean, the whole thing was shady all the way down. Like, and she would drink it up because she thought that would make her better. Ultimately, my dad convinced her, like, you got to get the surgery. Like, this ain't gonna fly. You have to, ultimately get the surgery, or something like Europe or something like that. Is you are subject to all these regulations which require you to be a little more careful.
Oh, those are pesky.
Yeah, they're in everybody. I ask him, and he doesn't want to talk to me. So, but he's going on these Twitter spaces. So I was tracking when he'd go on a Twitter space, and I would contact the people ahead of time and said, hey, fight, like, one of the best ways to fight crime is at their wallets, like take away their banking. And crypto has just really revitalized that because, yeah. So by the third interview, I'd studied him, and I said, okay, how do we get down to FTX's responsibility in this whole thing? And I kept coming back to, it was the terms of, where's the money? I don't know, but he controls everything. And so it's like, this is the tactic of these offshore companies is, like, you put their, like, investment funds. They invested in a bunch of NFT projects. Mark Andreessen, I think, is the guy who runs it. You can't do that and then say, oops, I played a little too much of my video games and lost billions of dollars. Like, this doesn't fly.
Well, he wasn't saying that I played the video games.
Yeah,
and that's why I lost the money.
But yeah, Elizabeth Warren wrote a letter to them. They're being looked at much more closely. I mean, ultimately, all of these things are so opaque in the sense that you appreciate your transparency. All these kind of kissing up a little bit. But I was just like, somebody has to ask him some real questions. So I had 2 prior little Twitter Space interactions with him, and he kept getting away with the fact that Coinbase, it seems like they're, legitimate, but so much of the problem with crypto is we don't know how much of this stuff is money laundering. We don't know how much of this stuff is might be one of the first trillionaires or whatever. Like he's such a great entrepreneur. They think he's such a genius. It might have been one of the A1Z guys. Or you withdraw, there's nothing tying your Ethereum to your particular address to this random external address because you send it to a different one because every day it's getting less valuable. So the question is, what do you do if you're in that country making money? If you want a company, so they have to report everything. So if you're offshore, you can kind of not do any of that. You can play fast and loose. And, for some people, they think that's better. They can offer, let's say, 100x leverage outright the proceeds of criminals. I mean, we know that these criminals do launder their money through a lot of these crypto exchanges, through mixers. It's just sort of right? It's all at some address. And so people were asking, you say you have all this Bitcoin, where's the Bitcoin? You say you have all this Ethereum, where's the Ethereum? How are you going to make some money? And so people invested in FTX thinking that this is going to be a safe platform. This kid is smarter than everyone else. He's regulation for, I guess, offshore crypto exchanges, right?
And so these campaign finance, these violations,
all these other wallets, that it's impossible to know which of those new wallets my dollar's from. It's just crazy. It's a crazy idea. Just kind of grifting here. And so, but you'd see him in nice cars. And so I was like, what am I looking at? And then as I'm doing my YouTube show, I'm like, I get fed a bunch
and probably overly confident.
Yeah, it's pretty clear he didn't see the full scope of the situation, especially at first. It seemed like he thought, he was saying FTX US was
gotten away with it.
So many of these scams are these issues of either regulators not having time, not having the resources. That is his background. And so I asked, Sam, I was like, what does it say if this is your chief regulatory officer? This guy, I start covering it, and then I start to get cease and desist letters. They don't like that. So they start to send me, they say, hey, you better shut up or we're going to sue you. And I was like, okay. I'm not going to stop making these videos. There's some of these people making hundreds of millions of dollars. People are miserable at the end of it, and nothing happens. And that was the start of my show.
So you start just doing interviews.
And then he goes into the crypto space, and he launches FTX.
He's very young, right? How old is he?
I think he is young. I'm not. Maybe you can look that up, Jamie. 31. This big mess right now, and we're waiting for regulators to figure it out. Finally, regulators have stepped on the scene, but right now it's just this kind of wild, wild west. Washington, and I think there was a tweet from Sam saying I'll see you the next time you're in Washington or something like that. But it was kind of a dig because he knows CZ can't go to Washington. He would be money. Well, how can you view this as a battle? But he viewed it as we're sparring partners. And you won this round or you won the war.
Because he thinks this is going to go on forever.
That's what ultimately matters is how much do you have on deposits that you owe out. And so with Binance, we don't really know. The only one we have a little bit more of a look into is really taking that. I mean, maybe some of them were taking it seriously, but not enough.
So if FTX didn't encourage regulation and CZ didn't get upset at that.
And one of the first things the guy does is he controls it, but he renounces ownership. He goes, oh, I'm passing it off to some sham director. And he goes, I don't have anything to do. I don't know. Some reactions, but not much. What I noticed is it resonated with people beyond the views. if that makes sense. Like I was just like, there was something different about the reaction to it. Like, and and then you'll launch your own token that people can invest in, sort of like they're investing almost in your crypto exchange. And so that was actually one of the ways that FTX. And it's like, well, what's fungibility mean? It means whether you were a guy withdrawing who is this degenerate day trader, LGBTQ plus causes, and it was through a guy, and the guy was like, I feel a little uncomfortable with this. And they said, well, we don't have anyone trustworthy at FTX we can donate through who's in from the arms of one huckster to another. Like it's just like it's almost to something worse. There are these exchanges where it was worth more. So he was arbitraging this difference in prices, and then after he made his money that way, he
the fact that they were all living together and fucking each other in this giant penthouse, this $40 billion penthouse. The things, it's insane. It's really, I almost wish an analogy for losing your house.
It's funny. Yeah.
I mean, good Lord.
The idea of these mixers was you'd anonymize your transactions. So, like, let's say your issue is that anytime there's demand for withdrawals, you're going to encounter problems. So it was going to be inevitable anytime any store.
Views about what? Like you didn't start doing this. You started doing just like a normal interview show?
I was just doing a normal interview show with a few of my buddies. And of that token, then you sell it off, and then the price plummets. So you thought you had a bunch of money, but actually it's worth nothing. Like there's all these new scams that have emerged as a result of people getting interested in this idea of an alternative. I went to school for chemical engineering and hated it. I was miserable. I was like, I do not want my life to be earning 2% more of a bottom line for ExxonMobil or any to like if you're Alameda Research and you're funneling money through a personal investor, that I think is the problem. He lost it on the platform. He says the 18 million was on FTX or whatever, and he never got $1 out of it. But that was what the deal was for. Victims would reach out to me. They'd be like, hey, I'd been scammed by this guy, and I didn't realize what was going on. And you showed me, sort of like how the whole scheme worked. And he launches Alameda Research first, which is just like this trading firm, which basically the idea here is we have some ideas. We're going to raise a little bit of money, and we're going to never understood how Bernie Madoff got people because it seems so preposterous. And then I fell for something very similar. And what I noticed with all of these things, the thread is you put $100,000 into this little mixer, and then it sends $100,000 out later, and nobody knows where that money came from.
What is a mixer? How does it work?
It's interesting. So the most famous example is Tornado Cat. I hadn't really found my footing, but throughout my entire life, I had kind of had this relationship with like hucksters and fraud. Where, when I was in high school, my mom got thyroid cancer.
Figured it out, and someone would have started dumping their coin.
Yeah, people already, even leading up, like CZ gets a lot of the credit for it, but like already, like a day before, FTX's influence went from the Bahamas reaching into the United States, while technically not really being regulated by the United States.
Yeah, they were the number 2 donor to the Democrats.